Have you ever heard the sound of freedom? Have you ever heard the sound of freedom?
You're listening to The Flip Side with Noah Filipiak, connecting the reality of the gospel to the grit of life. You can support the podcast and pick up some sweet Flipside swag at www.patreon.com/Noah Filipiak.
What is up, Flipoponemi? Welcome to episode 118 of the Flipside podcast. Today, I'm interviewing the Reverend William Mack III, known to most as Mack. Mack and I have been friends for a few years now. He is my spiritual director as well. Spiritual direction, if you're not familiar with it, it's kind of like counseling, but it is more listening to God on someone else's behalf and really focuses in on soul health. I highly recommend it. But Mack and I today in this episode have a great conversation about what pastors and ministry leaders are facing today. Look at the dynamic of the expectations within the church, how unhealthy they are, unrealistic they are, how pastors have to wear a mask, and also how churchgoers can help with this or contribute, right, to the harm. But I think it's often really helpful if you're not a pastor to listen in on this type of conversation, to know that your pastor or pastors are likely facing some very similar issues, and how even small words of encouragement can go a long way to your pastors. But with this conversation today, we ultimately are getting to, for all of us, whether you're a pastor, ministry leader, a churchgoer, church member, what we're getting, just a follower of Christ, the spiritual formation foundation that we all need. There's some really, really helpful foundational truths here for all of us that struggle with insecurity and anxiety and, unrealistic expectations, trying to do more than we can do, and margin and boundaries. So I think you're really going to be encouraged and blessed as well as challenged by this conversation. Let me tell you a little bit about Mack. He is a pastor, spiritual director, pastoral counselor, author, and creative, whose ministry centers on presence, listening, and compassionate accompaniment. Formed in spiritual direction and pastoral counseling, Mack brings a grounded, trauma-aware, and theologically rooted approach to care, helping individuals and leaders attend to God's movement in the midst of life's complexity. He's the founder of the Griot Project, a faith-based arts nonprofit and creative incubator that supports individuals, families, and communities in healing through storytelling, artistic expression, and spiritual formation. That website is thegriotproject.com, and Griot is spelled Griot. Mack also serves as executive director of Rooted Pastors, where he supports pastors and their spouses through spiritual direction, retreats, and holistic pastoral care. You can check Rooted out at rootedpastors.org. If you're a pastor ministry leader, reach out to them to get a connection going with Mack or one of their other staff who are all amazing. Mack is the author of 2 children's books, How Big Is God and A Prayer for You. They're on Amazon under his author name, I guess, W. Douglas Mack III on Amazon. We'll have links to those books and all those websites in the show notes as well. Mack lives in Chicago with his wife, Tori. They are proud parents of 5 amazing children and grandparents to 5 joyful grandchildren. So awesome. I post an exclusive blog to every one of these interviews. There'll be one, I have one posted of the conversation I have with Mack today. If you would like to check that out and have back and forth dialogue about this content, head over to patreon.com/Noah Filipiak. You can join Noah Filipiak, that is. You can join our Patreon community, and in doing so, you'll support the podcast, get some sweet Flipside swag, and get to dive in deeper with me on some of these real issues that affect all of us. Shout out, before we jump into the interview, to Angry Brew. Rocking my Angry Brew today, and my third favorite podcast is the Flipside mug. Coffee with a punch. angrybrew.com. 5lakes.com. Use promo code FLIP to get 10% off your order. Thanks so much for being a listener or a viewer on the flip side. Really appreciate you going along the journey with me and my guests. So let's jump into this conversation with Mack, and you are going to be encouraged and stretched by it. Here we go.
Heard the sound of freedom. Have you ever heard the sound of
All right, Mack, welcome to the flip side. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, brother. I'm glad. Thank you for the invite.
Absolutely. All right. First question, most important question. When did you go from being called William to being called Mack? Like, you are like Pele. You have one name. When did that happen for you?
That is funny. So I'm going to share this with you on the podcast because a lot of people don't know this. Mack has evolved over time, right? So my whole name is William Mack. When I was younger, don't tell nobody. When I was younger, I was not called William or Mack. Everybody back home calls me Dougie.
Okay.
So I'm Dougie back home. Then when I got to college, I was like, Dougie is way too country. I am a college man now. So I was William in college. And then I started teaching, and I was Mr. Mack. But I also started teaching in juvenile corrections, and everybody in corrections goes by their last name. So I went from Mr. Mack to just Mack, and it just kind of followed me there. So it was Mr. Mack, Pastor Mack, and now it's just Mack. So I could take it. It's a cool. If you're gonna have a name, you call it. It's cool. I wish it came with a little bit more money, but it's what it is.
You know what? It's way better than being called Philippiac.
It is definitely.
And there's worse names. There's worse than mine.
Definitely not a mouthful like Philippiac. Right. Yeah. So Mack it is. Yeah.
All right. So this is a game show. The game show is called "Which of these nicknames have you been called at least once of your memory?" Mac and cheese.
All the time.
Okay.
Yes.
Mack truck.
Mack truck. Yep.
Okay. I like that one. Big Mac.
Big Mac. Yes.
All right. How about this one? Mac sauce.
Mac sauce. I have.
Okay. I thought I came up with that one. I'm kind of sad. All right.
No.
Last, Mackety Mack.
Mackety Mack. Surprisingly, yes. Yes.
I love it. Okay,
yes.
Wow. I mean, it's a great name.
And I've been called Mackety Mack by a lot of pastors, which is crazy. That's crazy. Mac sauce actually came from a deacon at a church that I used to work with. And then the rest of them, like usually my spiel whenever I'm walking into a classroom, especially with younger kids.
Yeah.
I'm like, hello, my name is Mr. Mack, not Big Mac, not mac and cheese, not Mack truck, da-da-da-da-da-da. And they were like, oh, man. I'm like, yep, I'm going to kill all the jokes before y'all start bringing them up.
Oh, man.
It's usually my day one spiel when I give kids my name.
Did I miss any? Like, what's like any other nicknames that are out there for you?
No, but I did have a secretary once upon a time that used to keep a running list of all the ways that people spelled Mac. So it's, my Mac is M-A-C-K, but I've been M-A-C, I've been M-A-C-H, I've been M-C. And so she used to keep this running list of different ways that people would mispronounce Mac. And I'm like, it's just M-A-C-K. She's like, I know, Mr. Mac, but today they sent a correspondence that said M-A-C or it's just M-C, period, So, yeah, but I think you got all the nicknames.
Okay. I want to go with Mac sauce for the rest of the interview.
Sauce. That's fine.
All right. Mac, tell us just about yourself and kind of then lead into how you ended up becoming a pastor.
Gosh. So my William Mack, I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, and born and raised in Louisville. I am the oldest of three. I tell people that I was born and raised in Louisville, ended up going to the University of Kentucky for college. And I didn't go to UK for an education. I went to UK for an experience because I just wanted to be out of my mama's house and I wanted to be grown and I wanted to just be, right? And while I was there, I had an encounter with Jesus and was like, oh, daggone it, somebody's actually praying for me. And I remember telling Jesus, I was like, listen, if I always felt like the gospel was, it was attainable, but it was also, it had been like garbled so much, right? Like you had to have an MDiv, you had to be preacher, you had to come from a pastor's family. And I just feel like the gospel was supposed to be for everybody. And so, a friend of mine reached out to me. And mind you, I went to college for an experience. I was not trying to, lead any ministries or do any Bible studies or anything like that. I wanted to go for the parties. Like, so my GPA that first year was horrible. And I slowly but surely started giving, recommitting my life back to Christ. I was going to the 6 o'clock service at this small church right off campus. And as I was, recommitting my life to following Jesus, a friend of mine said, "Hey, I've been praying about starting a Bible study on campus." And as I was praying, I feel like the Lord laid you on my heart. And I'm like, come on, that's not fair, God. Like I'm still a freshman. Like let at least get to junior year.
Freshman year.
And so we started this Bible study on campus, and it was just 5 of us in the lobby of our dorm, and it grew from being in the lobby of our dorm to 20 people right outside the computer lab to the next thing you know, we were meeting in the commons, which is like the food court. And we had like 130 people who were coming out to this Bible study. And it was real life conversations with college students who were trying to understand the Bible and like live real life at the same time. And so like, how do I follow Jesus in the midst of all of this stress and anxiety? How do I follow Jesus in the midst of all this temptation? How do I follow Jesus? And I'm not really sure whether Jesus is the way. And we just had these really raw, really authentic conversations about faith and living and life. And we were holding each other accountable-ish as best we could. And it was just really the beautiful thing. And so that ended up being the rest of my college time at UK. It was Mack became the leader of Abundant Life Bible Study. That was the name of the Bible study. I sung with the gospel choir. And so God was kind of shaping me in that way to do that. But I never said, I've never been the career pastor. Like, there's some people like come out the womb and say, "Ooh, when I grow up, I'm gonna serve Jesus and I'm gonna be a pastor." That was never my story. And so graduated from college, ended up meeting my wife shortly thereafter. She and I both ended up working at a mega church. She was the women's ministry director. I was the worship leader and children's ministry director. And it was cool. We were living life, serving Jesus, having our family. We were great. And then we relocated back to Louisville, Kentucky. And at the time, some friends and I got together and were like, "Hey, the area where I was serving as a community center director was a food desert. And so at the end of the month, people were coming to the community center on a very regular basis to get food resources. And so friends of mine just got together just really organically and were like, "Hey, what would it look like if we just offered like a weekend worship service on a Saturday?" And so we started this ministry called A Meal and a Message. And it was an opportunity where we partnered with other food providers. So shout out to KFC. They provided us with 300 pieces of chicken every week. And Kentucky Harvest, they gave us bread from Panera. And then people would make sides. And then we fed people on the weekend. And then what was left over, people could take home. And that was that. And so we did that for like a year and a half. And so somebody was like, "Man, this is a really cool church." And I'm like, "Nope, this is not a church because I am not a pastor. This is just people who love Jesus, who just want to serve the community." And so we did that for 18 months. And a friend of mine was like, "Nah, dog, I think you for real sleeping on your call. Like this is definitely a church and you're definitely a pastor." I'm like, "Yeah, nah." And then I fooled around and prayed about it and definitely felt like the Lord was calling us because we started noticing salvations and people wanted to meet more regularly. And couldn't really deny what God was saying. But of course, all of my insecurities on why I shouldn't be a pastor, why I couldn't be a pastor, they were screaming. And finally, I submitted to the Lord and was like, "Okay, Lord, if this is what you're going to do, this is your church for as long as you say that the church is supposed to live, and I will serve in this capacity for as long as you tell me to serve. But the minute you say I'm out, I'm out." And just trusted the church back to Jesus, and Grace Community Church was born, and had the amazing opportunity to serve that community for 12 years. And it was an amazing journey with Jesus, man, that I was not on my bingo card leading into it, because I never ever said that I wanted to be a pastor, but I absolutely love pastoring, sharing the gospel, shepherding, leading, in that way with those people. So yeah, that was my journey to pastoring.
Yeah. So why did you leave pastoring to do what you're doing now? Talk about how that transition, what happened and how it was for you.
Yeah, so I have always believed that we should have a space in our spirits and our hearts, our minds, to just be open to the invitations of Jesus, right? And when we look at the ministry of Jesus, Jesus moved around as the Father gave him direction. And so Jesus wasn't locked into one location, but he was locked into one mission. And so I was always aware that I was not going to be the career pastor, pastoring a church for the rest of my life. And so when I prayed about it, I was really clear that my call was to plant a healthy missional community in the Portland neighborhood of Louisville, Kentucky. That was my call. And so when that call became very clear to me, I always knew that there was an expiration date on my time in that call. And so in my mind, it was going to be, what made sense, like 15, 20 years, because that'd be about the time my kids got out of school. God saw otherwise. Of course, the pandemic hit in year 11. And around year 11 is when we started noticing just some shifts. I mean, the world was feeling it, the pandemic, but we also started noticing that God was doing some work as far as calling us away. I knew that there was a need for leaders, pastors, to get the support that they needed as they were shepherding other people through hard times. Especially pastors in under-resourced communities, because pastors in our context don't have the resources to take a sabbatical or to have a therapist or to do any spiritual direction or even know what spiritual direction is. They're just doing the work. And what was starting to happen slowly but surely was that I was having more and more conversations with brothers and sisters who were preaching faithfully and serving well on Sunday, but they were depressed Monday through Saturday, myself included. And many of the people in the congregations didn't know what what was going on in their lives, myself included. And so there just started to be this thing forming in my heart of like, who is caring for the care providers? Who's providing the spiritual, emotional, mental support that they need to continue to do the work that God has created and called them to do? And so while the pandemic was going on, I started exploring spiritual direction. I got a spiritual director, and then I was like, yes, this is it. Like, I believe in the ministry of spiritual formation and direction, particularly for individuals in marginalized and under-resourced communities. I want to be a safe space. I feel like I'm called to be a safe space for pastors in this way. So I started training to be a spiritual director in 2021. In 2021. 2-year process. Shout out to Sustainable Faith. That was the name of the organization that I did my spiritual direction training through. And after that, my wife and I both started recognizing that God was calling us into that area of ministry of formation, direction, support for pastors, leaders, families in that way. And so in 2021, August of 2021, I stepped down as a pastor of Grace Community Church to step into that ministry more full time to provide care to pastors and leaders. And so now I currently serve as a care provider and executive director for Rooted Ministries, where we provide pastoral care, spiritual direction, counseling, and coaching to pastors, ministry leaders, and their spouses.
So with Rooted, for the, you just said it, I'm going to kind of slow it back just a little bit for listeners. For someone listening, who can reach out to Rooted? Like what types of, I don't know, do you need a certain job or job title to reach out to Rooted? And then what could someone expect that reaches out to Rooted?
So I tell people Rooted is for anyone that is called to ministry, right? If you're a care provider, our mission statement says that we provide pastoral care and support to pastors, ministry leaders, and their spouses. And so broad, you don't have to be paid staff, because we try to keep it open because it can mean a lot of things for a lot of people. In some ministry contexts, you're not considered a pastor unless you're getting paid, which I think is crazy. You and I both know that there's a lot of people that are doing a lot of good ministry work that don't get paid. We say pastors and ministry leaders because there are some people who are not working for or tethered to a local church doing their ministry, but they're doing good gospel and kingdom work. And so they need that support as well. And so, and then there's the spouses, right? You know, there are men and women who come alongside these individuals who are called to do ministry work, but they have a unique need as well. And, you know, we've shared offline before, like our wives support us, they love us, but there's a lot that goes along with being the spouse of a ministry leader. There's a lot that goes along with being the spouse of a pastor. And what we like to say at Rooted is that we understand that, not because we're better than you, but because we are you. Everyone on our team has either been a pastor or is serving currently in some ministry capacity. Our spouses will walk alongside of us, and you can't be called to any type of ministry, whether it's pastoring or serving in some type of parachurch ministry or a community center, without it having a trickle down effect on your marriage and in your family. And so we exist to come alongside those brothers and sisters as they're serving faithfully, to one, remind them of the abiding love of Jesus Christ that is always present to them, but also provide just a safe space, like I like to say, a safe space to breathe, to cry, to cuss, to yell, to process, because oftentimes there's not very many safe spaces for ministry leaders to do that.
Yeah. I want to focus back in on that pastor-church relationship because I just think that's really relevant for listeners that are going to church and or, you know, pastors like me that are leading a church. What are specifically pastors facing today? That's a broad question, but you could go multiple layers with that. The pastors you're working with, just your take, your pulse on pastors in general.
So, you turn on the news, there's the answer, right? There's so much.
Yeah.
And specifically for pastors is how do we serve the people that we're called to shepherd while also processing all the stuff that's going on around and inside us?
Yeah.
Like, how do I, and I'll use my brothers and sisters in Minneapolis for an example. I've got quite a few pastors and leaders in Minneapolis that I walk alongside that are pastoring churches and parachurch ministries, and they're trying to metabolize the protests. They're metabolizing the shootings. They're metabolizing the response from the administration or lack thereof. They're metabolizing all of that stuff. And I have had pastors say, I have specifically not said anything because I don't want anybody to think that this is a left or a right thing.
Yeah.
But I am angry or I am afraid or I am scared. And so I don't know where to do that. And so I'm like, hey, here it is. I'm not here to be political one way or the other. But if you need a place to go, this is crazy, or this is not normal, or I am scared, or I am afraid, and I don't know if I can necessarily say that in front of my congregation. I had one pastor, very, very wise. He didn't say anything for a week because he said, I had so many emotions that I didn't say anything for a week. And when I finally said something very, 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 very abstract, that was the Sunday that a visitor showed up and she wrote all over the comment card, the worship service was great until the pastor got too political and da-da-da-da-da. He said, Mac, I swear I didn't say, he gave me the exact words that he said. And what he did was he said, basically to an extent, let's pray for the families of the two individuals that were killed in Minneapolis. And this particular individual thought that was a political statement, and just beat this brother up. And he's like, what do I do? Like, if I don't say anything, if I do say anything, and that's just one example of many, right? It could be politics. It could be the environment. It could be marriage. It could be finances, right? How do I preach and teach on finances in a healthy, theological, safe way, and I'm going through a bankruptcy at the exact same time? Or how do I, support other individuals through their marriage when my wife and I haven't had a healthy conversation or even had a date night in the last year and a half? And so, giving pastors space to process that out loud and do it in a safe space and maybe even maybe offer some resources to be able to say, hey, have you considered this? One of the resources that we offer is that we offer retreats. And so we'll say, hey, you and your wife need some time away. We offer a marriage retreat. I think this would be a great opportunity for the two of you to get away. And this is what this could look like. And so when you ask what our pastor's facing, we're facing everything else that everybody else is facing. We just have to do it from the position of being a pastor. And oftentimes people have this idea, sometimes even the pastor, that the pastor should be above it. That if anybody's going to have the right outlook, the right words, and the right positioning on how to move forward, it should be the pastor, right? Mm-hmm. And he should be above reproach, and he should be happy and gleeful and on my side, whatever side that may be at any given time. And that's just not realistic or fair.
Yeah. And I ask these questions for listeners who aren't pastors as well, so they can hear, as a pastor, I want people that go to churches, whatever church that may be, to have empathy for their pastor, to understand what their pastors go through that's unseen. And so that's some of the context of this for pastors listening and for those who are, churchgoers.
A Christian, a pastor is a human who has decided to follow Jesus. A pastor is a human who has decided to say yes to the call to pastoring other humans. You can never negate the humanity of any individual in any role and say, oh, because you're in this role, you can no longer be human. No, I preach every Sunday. Yes. I lead a flock. Absolutely. I shepherd a flock, whatever you want to say my role is, but I'm still very human. Right. Yeah. And as a human, I feel stuff just like you do. I weep. I lament. I get joyful. I feel all the things. And I feel like now more than ever, probably the pandemic has definitely been a gift in that way, is that there is a higher awareness of like, hold on, there are real people that are serving in care positions that need to be cared for as well. And so when people ask me specifically, why I only care for pastors? Well, oftentimes pastors get overlooked and they placed on this pedestal that they should be above any of the things that are going on. And we forget that these individuals are human beings just like everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a loaded question. This is, to me, the traditional senior pastor role is impossible. It is unrealistic. It's unhealthy to ask of someone. I have some thoughts on that. What do you think? Agree, disagree, somewhere in between.
Agree. Totally agree. I think that the load that we place on senior pastors is a bit much, but we also have to look at like where do we get this idea or this avatar of the senior pastor from, right? Like the senior pastor should be all things to all people. He's supposed to shake every hand, kiss every baby, be available, preach the perfect sermons, never offend anybody, be right if you're a right-leaning individual, be left if you're a left-leaning individual, be present for every hospital visit. That is a lot. I serve a pastor right now who is an introvert. Now, one of the best preachers that I've ever heard, but he's an extreme introvert. And he doesn't get his hands slapped for not preaching well or not showing up on Sunday and creating a great worship experience. He gets his hands slapped because, he doesn't talk to a whole lot of people after worship is over with. And it's not because he doesn't care about the people, but his battery is depleted, right? Yeah. So by the time he gets to the end of the first or second service, he is fully aware that like I am there and he needs to go back and recharge. And I don't think that he's been given the grace to do that, but he's also not articulated it as well either, right? Mm-hmm. And so people have this expectation of the pastor to be this extroverted, gregarious individual that is always ready to, and he's like, I am done. And it's not because of a lack of love. Yeah. I just need to go someplace and charge in my battery for a few moments, right? So this expectation has made the people and the pastor both be at this place of tension where I'm like, man, maybe you might need to communicate that to the people.
Right.
And maybe the people might need to understand that I'm pretty sure he's not the only introvert in the congregation, right? And introverts can help the extroverts understand that, hey, pastor's not being standoffish or he does not want to be bothered with it. It's just he just needs to go recharge. So when he preaches and goes back to his office for 20 minutes, give him 20 minutes. That's all he needs. He'll recharge his battery. He'll be back for you. And so I do think that the avatar that we've created for senior pastors definitely needs to be revisited. I could be on the soapbox all day talking about that. And the context, I think context matters too in the church and where you're serving. When we look at like the senior pastor and that role and how that role is executed and who's supporting the senior pastor. But I definitely think we got to do a better job, both for the pastor and for the congregation, in defining what does it mean to be a senior leader in the church.
Yeah. Yeah. And my angle on that for me has been as a church planter. I've planted 2 churches, and I feel for established church pastors because they have to, you're coming into an established community,
right?
And you have to navigate, you already hit on it, like the political polarities. If you were a senior pastor during the pandemic, I mean, the amount of abuse that pastors took from congregants who frankly just threw out the fruits of the Spirit, and their number one priority was, do you wear masks or not? And if you don't, I'm going to come at you. I'm coming at your character. I'm coming at these like vicious attacks from people that you thought were like your friends or your church family, right? Yeah. So I feel for established church pastors that have to navigate those things within a congregation that already kind of has their ways set with church planting. And there's a lot of context for being a senior pastor. You could be on a big multi-staff church. You could be a solo pastor, of an established church. With church planting, the unique angle is, as you know, you have to be an expert in everything from the jump. Right. So like you're kind of it when you start. And so you have to be an expert in finances. You have to be an expert in, volunteer systems. You have to be an expert in your own fundraising, let alone, the finances of the church. You have to be an expert in preaching, expert in all the shepherding things, the pastoral care visits, lunches, coffees, discipleship systems. And I think the hardest thing that I've experienced is that when and you mentioned it too. I'm glad you did. You're also expected as a senior pastor to be like the voice for every justice issue that's out there. Yep. And I'm very passionate about justice and racial justice, economic justice. Lots of this podcast is devoted to that. But it can be very fatiguing. And it's almost like kind of, you see it more in movies, I think, or TV shows, somebody walks out and all the reporters stick a microphone in their face and there's flash bulbs and it's like, give us a statement, give us a statement, give us a statement. And you're just like, I don't want to give you a statement. It's 10 p.m. on Saturday. Like, I just need to chill. And this horrible thing happened. And now I'm expected tomorrow to or some kind of, anyway, it's a lot. So the hardest thing that I've experienced with all that is like when you mess something up, when you don't do something perfectly, and that could be as simple as like how something is set up on Sunday morning to something, who knows? It could be any number of, bigger things than that. But it's like the Olympics. I'm thinking of like figure skating or something, and they don't land something just right. So they get this deduction. And it's like, it can feel, and certainly not everyone, but I want churchgoers to have this perspective. It can feel like as a pastor, the people in your church, depending on the culture that's been created, are like those judges with the scores in the Olympics and say,
absolutely,
oh, you messed up there. Oh, you said that. You did this about this, the left and the right, or you didn't set, that wasn't well organized. Where was the childcare for this? And your competency as a pastor is always like on trial. You're like, I could lose my job. And, if this continues, I'm scared of that. But I think the hardest thing is that often church people will attach your character to those things. Yep. So it's not just like, oh, you couldn't land that triple jump in figure skating right. You stumbled. But you're a blank person because of that. Like you are a mean, bad, selfish, irresponsible person and man, it's like, woo, like
That's a lot.
That's
It
a lot
is.
to carry. Yeah.
And it makes and it can and so think about the effects of that, right? Like so either I become I work with pastors who experience PTSD because the church just like the people in the church, right? Just I feel like I can never do anything wrong. So either I become extremely timid or I become extremely defensive.
Right.
And so how do I react and respond to all of that that's going on when I realize like it's not I first of all, anybody that's listening, understand that nobody beats up the pastor more than the pastor beats up the pastor. Whatever bulb you saw on the stage that was flickering and then eventually went out, I promise you, more than likely the pastor saw that bulb as well. And he is kicking himself, especially for church planters, right? Because for church planters, we, like you said, we have to be all things at all times. I think about my brothers and sisters that I was walking with during the pandemic, right? In an instant, we had to go from being pastors and preachers to being producers. Mm-hmm. Everybody had to have the good mainstream. I tell the Easter 2020 story for me. So Easter 2020, we had just moved into a new building in February. March, everything went shut down, right? So Easter, everybody know Pastor Mack goes big for the holy days, right? So Easter, Pentecost, Advent, we're a celebratory community, right? And so I'm thinking we're going to keep this same energy Easter, even though we're going to be remote. And so had the kids make a video, had the seniors make a video, had the thing, and we had it already. All I had to do was just hit the button and upload. We were ready to go. Dude, when I tell you everything crashed, everything crashed. Everything crashed. I was like, I have single-handedly destroyed Easter. That's what I've done. Like, Jesus, you did that thing on the cross, so you got it from the grave. Thanks. But this guy right here in Louisville, Kentucky, I've destroyed Easter for my entire congregation. Hated it. And everybody was like, it's okay. We'll just upload it at a different time and they can watch it later. And it ended up being fine. But I share that story to say nobody could tell me that I wasn't the worst thing in the entire world. Like, and you're right. You're beating yourself up. And then when you have other individuals that will do that and attack it to a part of your character, right? Like, not only were you a bad pastor, but you weren't even thinking about da 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 da. Or I put in so and so, and it's like, wait a minute, hold on, y'all, that's not fair. And it's hard sometimes to continue to navigate in those spaces because you want to do it with love, you want to do it with grace, but when it becomes personal, it becomes personal, and sometimes people respond from a personal hurt place. And the only response you got in that moment is to, again, it's a human response. And so, no, you're absolutely right, bro. And the weight that we put on ourselves, the expectations we put on ourselves, it definitely has to be evaluated. Like, who told you that? That's one of the questions that I always like to ask pastors. Who told you that you were a bad pastor? Who told you that your character was flawed because you made this statement? Who told you that? And usually that answer is one or three things. It's either God told you that, the devil told you that, or somebody else told you that. And two of the three have a tendency to lie, right? And so the reality is we have to sit back and go, okay, hold on. What's really happening right now in this moment? What is the truth of what happened in this moment? And where is the grace in this moment? Jesus never called anybody to be a shepherd and be perfect at the same time. It's an impossibility. And so the minute you fall from perfection is the minute where grace steps in. And we just have to remember that Jesus didn't call us to be perfect. He called us to be servants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And you're hitting on a lot of that emotional side of things, which ties into mental health side of things. I know I struggle with all these things, and I assume many pastors do as well when they're vulnerable. The insecurity, the anxiety around things, which can lead into depression. Mm-hmm. There's the ruminating, like you said, the pastor beats themselves up more than anyone else. Like, we're the one thinking about this conflict in bed at night, and that other person probably isn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what if pastors are dealing with those types of emotional and mental health weights, not that there's a silver bullet, but I mean, what are some practices, exercises, kind of reminders that you would give, to listeners that are listening now, that are in that space?
Yeah. So one of my favorite pictures of Jesus is Jesus going away. Like he left the disciples and just would go away. Right. I love the story of Jesus on the boat. Hey, let's go over to the other side. And then Jesus goes and take a nap. Right. And the disciples have to wake him up like, do you not care that we're going to die? And he's like, I was taking a nap. Like I said, we'll go up to the other side. And there's a whole lot of preaching that could be done right there. But both times we see Jesus getting some rest, going away, making space to recharge his mind, body, and soul. And so I encourage leaders all the time to look at their schedules and ask themselves, where have I made room to find rest? To be with the Father, to be with myself.
Yeah.
A lot of times we don't know what's in us until it comes up out of us. And sometimes it comes out in very unhealthy ways. And shout out to my one of my spirit babies. Her name is Aaliyah. I just had just one of those days where I had my calendar and then my calendar got hijacked and then I got a phone call and then something else happened and then something else happened. And Aaliyah, just being Aaliyah, did something that a teenage girl does. It was something real. I went off. What is wrong with that? She was like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, no, what's wrong with you? Aaliyah got the lion's share of the day over just dropping candy. It was so minimal, I can't even remember what it was. And when she walked back to the gym and I went back to my office, I was like, none of that belonged to Aaliyah.
Mm.
And I called her back and said, hey, I owe you an apology. And I didn't tell her about all things. I said, you ended up getting something from me that did not belong to you, but it's been today. And, I experienced the grace of God through Aaliyah in that moment. She was like, I knew it was something. She said, because that's not you.
Mm-hmm.
And she accepted her apology and we went on about our business. But I tell that story to say that could be any of us at any given time. There's so much that's going on. And we do well. We and I just talked about it before we hopped on this podcast to create our calendars and to honor the calendars and to honor the rhythms. But the truth of the matter is that life hits. It hits hard. It hits fast. And as much as we try to plan ahead, there's so much that happens unexpectedly that we just don't know about. And so making space to say, where am I right now in this moment? What am I feeling in this moment? And what do I want to do with these feelings? Mm-hmm. We have to be intentional about that. And for a lot of us, that is a new way of being that we've never been invited into before. Like, how do I sit with the fact that I'll give you an example. I got to the end of last year and I was sick of everybody and everything. And so I made an appointment with my therapist. My therapist was like, what's going on? I said, I'm sick of everybody and everything. And he was like, okay, William, what have you done that has been life-giving to you and has fed your soul?
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, I'm a screenwriter, and so I like to write fiction. He's like, when's the last time you wrote something? When's the last time you created something? And I was like, dang, it's been a minute. And it probably been about 6 months. He's like, yeah, what would it look like for you to enter into a space where you just fed your soul? So that's the other thing, is like, identify what is life-giving to you. I have a friend of mine that's into running. I don't run nowhere unless I'm being chased, but he loves running. And she loves running. She signed up for a marathon. Training for this marathon has brought her great joy. And she does ministry every single day. What is life-giving to you? And while you're identifying what's life-giving, also identify what is life-draining. Like, what are the places that you have to occupy, or maybe you don't have to occupy, that absolutely just drain your soul? And how do you prepare for those things, right? In my role as executive director of Rooted, I just shared this with my team, so this is not a surprise. I love these conversations. I love the one-on-ones. I love the retreats. I'm not the biggest fan of administration. I'm not. I can do it because I've been doing it for the last 21 years. But that doesn't mean that that's one of the things that gives me life. But what it does do is that it fuels me to do the things that does give me life. So when I show up and it's an office day, I'm able to show up in the office because the office days allows me to show up at the retreats, allows me to show up at the workshops, allows me to show up for the speaking engagement. So it's not one of the things I look forward to, but it's one of the things that I know is necessary to do. So identifying what is life-giving, what is life-draining, and making space to sit with Jesus, to sit with God, to sit with yourself so that you can actually hear and discern what is going on the inside of you. And maybe you might need to do that with a spiritual director. Maybe you might need to do that with a therapist. I recommend both. I have both. But I think that it's important for every spiritual leader, spiritual care provider to recognize that our souls are always being pulled and stretched like taffy, and we need to make sure that we're not breaking. And oftentimes, when we find leaders that are quote unquote in moral failure or have snapped or have walked away, it's usually because they haven't had the time to attend to their souls the way that they need to. And what we see on the outside is something that had been happening on the inside for a very long time.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a whole other layer of this conversation, how judgmental the church is when a leader has what we call a moral failure. And certainly we're all accountable for our actions. But those things don't happen overnight. They build up. And you said the avatar, the culture that's been built within American Christianity of these expectations, and just there's so much there where the pastor ends up having to wear a mask because it's the only way to keep your job. It's the only way to kind of put on that front, like, I've got it all together. Therefore I am qualified to be your leader. Yeah. Therefore, Jesus is the product that you should buy because look how well it's working in my life. And man, behind that mask, stuff just erodes and erodes and erodes, and man, that's a tough broken cycle.
I can tell you how many pastors said, I'm scared I'm going to lose my job. And so the beautiful part about what we get to provide as a ministry through Rooted is that we serve 26 denominations right now, and that is, I always quote that number because we became a safe space for pastors outside of their denominations, because one of the layers of fear for them was if I disclose my anger, for example, to a denominational leader, I am afraid that I will lose my job, and this is my livelihood. And this is literally all I've ever studied for the last 15, 20 years. Right. And so me losing this job is not an option, especially when I legitimately love what I do, but I'm just angry all the time. I've got a pastor I walk with right now, and actually a few pastors, that there's this anger that's just right underneath the surface, right? And they just need a safe place to say, I am angry. But I know I can never say that to my deacons or to my elder board, or at least I'm afraid to say it to my elders, my deacon board, because I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job. Well, then that's another layer. And we just tell pastors and leaders, mask up, mask up, mask up, mask up, mask up, mask up, and give us this joyous, fruitful, celebratory Jesus. And you be the product, right? You can't be the barber with a bad haircut. Like it just can't happen.
Exactly.
You can't.
Yes.
You can't.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Yeah. One more question on this kind of line, and then I'll switch gears. The new way of being, why is that? Why for many, it is so hard to make the shift into that new way of being. And what I mean by some of that is, we know as leaders, you need to have margin. You need to create the space to do, some of what you're saying, like to invest in yourself. You need to be able to say no. You need to be able to say no when these demands are piling up and coming at you and you don't have room on your plate. And I can just speak for myself. I can tell myself those things. I could hear them in a sermon or, a talk. And then I continue to find myself saying yes. I continue to find myself with no margin. And then it's like a shame spiral because it's like, why do you keep doing that? And I can't stop doing that. Like when that moment comes, I'm just using myself as an example, but broadly speaking, why is it hard to make that shift into the new way of being? And how can we as leaders break through and actually make that shift to the
Yeah.
new way of being.
Hey, so the short answer is that we reward doing. We
Yeah.
reward doing. You get a gold star for doing. Even in the military, right? You get more gold stars for battles that you fought and in combatants that you engage with, right? You get the attaboy, attagirls for the doing, not the being. Nobody goes, I'm so proud of you for meditating today. Like, we don't do that, right?
Yeah.
And so what we tell pastors is, here are the metrics that we use to measure your success as a pastor. How many butts do you have in the seat? How much money do you have in the plate? How many baptisms did you do? How many? And again,
Yeah.
these measurables matter. And we think about sustainability, right? But we reward and emphasize doing. If you do this, then you will get that. And that is how the machine works, right? Not recognizing and pulling back the lens just a little bit and recognizing that it is your being first that influences the doing. How I am affects what I do. There's plenty of, we've seen plenty of examples of men and women that have served in the kingdom well, and they were doing the things, they were preaching all the sermons. And I'll use myself as an example. You couldn't tell me I was killing the game when I was being asked to go speak here and asked to go do the book review here and do that. And to me, not my ego, but I was told that this is a mark of ministry success, right? That people want to hear what you have to say. People want you on their program, on their roster, because you are doing more. I'm being flown out to California. I'm going to England. I'm doing that. I'm doing all the things. I even remember at one point, I was the director of evangelism for the National Baptist Convention USA Incorporated. It was a big thing. And my aunt was like, oh my gosh, you are the director of the National Baptist. That's great. I was also still in college, wrestling with lust, wrestling with my identity, all the things, right? But I got the attaboy.
Right.
Because I was doing more, right, on a national level at this point. And the last person that probably needed to be doing anything on a national level was that version of William Mack.
Right.
That version of William Mack that was grieving his father, missing his mother, didn't know who he was, trying to figure out all his manhood stuff. It just, that version of William Mack did not need to be the national nothing. But guess what? I knew how to speak well. I knew how to lead worship. I knew how to move a crowd. And so because I knew how to do that, nobody ever asked about my being. And my being was a hot mess. And so when it finally all came, erupted, crumbled out, whatever visual we want to use, people were so surprised, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that. Oh my, William Mack, like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, I've been screaming silently, but I didn't know how to articulate that. I didn't know who to articulate that to. Nobody had ever even talked about, hey, how's your soul go? Yeah. They were asking, how's your preaching? What's your outline look like?
Yeah.
So we emphasize that a lot. And so it becomes, Jesus invites us to come follow him, not in just the preaching and the discipling, but if we're truly going to follow Jesus, Jesus was with the Father and he abided with the Father in a way that even in him not doing, he was still being. And so we've got to put a greater emphasis on being with the Father and allowing the being to inform the doing. Because if you do that in that order, maybe some of our doing we just don't do. You follow Jesus. Jesus told them to go get the food. He didn't go get the food. But as church planners, what do? We go get the food. We cook the food. We lay out the food. Right?
Well, because we have to get the food correctly. We got to get it the right way.
We got to get it correctly. And we got to make sure that the gluten-free options are there. And we got to make sure that, right? But even Jesus shows a systems management, right? Like I'm not going to do all of that. And likewise, flip side, there's some things you can't do. Can't nobody do this cross thing but me. Right. And Jesus shows us in the garden. I don't really want to do that, but that's what I've been sent to do. So nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done, Father. And so if we really allowed our being to inform our doing, it will show us what we are supposed to be doing and what we're not supposed to be doing, what our yeses should be and what our nos should be. And we can walk confidently in those. I have gotten to the place now where between age and just, leaning into being more, that my no's are so anointed right now that, I say no probably more than I say yes. Yeah. Not to be persnickety or mean, but just because it doesn't come into alignment to who I believe God's called or created me to be. So I'm okay with saying no and saying, hey, I'm not the person for you, but I know somebody, but I could tell you the version of William Mack 10 years ago could have never done that. If you asked me to do it, I would have thought that was an invitation from God, and I am supposed to say yes. But what if there are some invitations that come to you that you're supposed to say no to, and you're still called, and you're still gifted?
Yeah.
I recognize that like there are certain invitations that I could say yes to. I'll give you a good example. I graduate at the end of May. Somebody's asked me to come out and do a retreat like the week before, right? I want to do the retreat, but I also recognize that doing retreat work takes a lot out of me, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. The prep work, being present, da 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 da, and then that following week is graduation week and all the things that capital B. If I want to be present to my family, to my friends, to myself, and with God, just to absorb this, I'm going to have to say no, right? And that's a hard no, but it's a no that is necessary, that I believe that God is in. God is in the no's just as much as he's in the yeses. And when we focus on being rather than doing, we are able to be a little bit more comfortable with saying, okay, God is the God of no and he's the God of yes, and I'm okay with both of them.
I love that.
And it's hard because, again, we don't put a lot of emphasis on being. We put a lot of emphasis on doing. But again, I think the gift of the pandemic is a lot of people recognizing that their being has been dysregulated, disassociated from their doing. And so people want to bring that back into alignment. I think that's really where you start finding just like the spirit at work, when you can bring the two into an alignment and be like, okay, my being and my doing are in alignment and I feel good about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's really helpful. And what I'm hearing even for myself is when that being is your priority, your focus, your emphasis, then I know where my being is. Like I know those things that bring life, and I'm in my second half of life. I just took a mini sabbatical. I've really recalibrated my job in very significant ways because I was very burnt out with way too much on my plate. So this has been a kind of a long discernment process, and I'm not out of the woods yet, but that I know when I'm off of my being. So I know the things that bring life to me. Yeah. And these are ministry things. These aren't just like, oh, I'm just going to go whatever, like play video games or something.
Yeah.
These are like the ministry things that bring life to me that are having impact, that I know like this is legit ministry fruit.
Absolutely.
And it brings me life. And there's even a part of me that experiences joy and peace, while doing this. And certainly not 100% of the things we get to do are going to be in there. But when I'm moved away from that in a significant way and doing a lot of things outside of that, from the doing, even if I do too much of some of those things, right? Like you said, you're doing too much and you don't have the margin baked in. You know when you're off. And if that's really helpful, just to have that perception where with this new way of being, to go, the metric isn't the amount of things I'm doing. The metric is, am I living in that space of being? Like, am I living in that wheelhouse of peace and joy and being? And at some point, if these things are pulling you out of that too much, like you said, these anointed no's from God, we have to be obedient to cut those things off and like make significant changes to say, God has called me to... my yoke is easy, my burden is light. Like he's called me to be still and know that he's God. And if I'm not able to do that because of these, so that's been helpful for me, even as we talk and kind of, summarizing a lot of the stuff I've been working through in these last few months.
And also thinking too about being in relation to like the people that I'm in relationship with. So what has shifted for me in the last, just since December, is I want to be more fully present to my kids. Yeah. Right. And not to say that I haven't been to this point, but I want to be, if I'm going to say yes to an engagement now, right, I'm looking at basketball schedules. I'm looking at I'm looking at play schedules. I'm looking at birthday calendars. Like I don't, and yeah, I used to think that my presence, I'm the dad in the house, and so and my kids are used to me traveling. Dad travels, is what he does. It's all fine, but I want to be there. Like I want to be. I don't want my kids when they say goodbye to me and remember me go, oh, he was a good pastor, he was a good counselor. I want them to say he was a good father, right? And I want there to be memories of me there with them in the games, right? I want to be there, and so that's kind of shifted some of my responses to things now, right? And I'm completely okay with that. I want to be a supportive, loving. Like I don't want there to be another cheerleader in my wife's life louder than me, right? And so I want to be that. And so again, that shifts that. And so I then present that to God. Like, how do I do that? Also, I want to be for myself, right? Like I want to, and I think you and I've had these conversations. Like there are some things that I want to write. There's some things I would like to produce. There's some things that I believe that God has given me, and I want to be all that God has created me to be, and not have to put things on the back burner because the avatar is that you can't be a preacher and be a creative at the same time, right? Like I want to bring all of those back up. And once you're able to be honest and intentional in those spaces, it really does begin to kind of fuel how you shape out your day, your calendar, all those things, to what you just said. Like with, I need to take a little sabbatical. I need yes, 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 and yes. And God is in that. And I think that honors the Father, and it honors the creation of you, who you are, by just saying, okay, this is who God has called me to be. And I want to lean into that being.
Yeah. That's actually my last question that I have written out. Talk about your creative pursuits. Just start with, what are they? What are you doing? You've listed some that you'd like to do. Just give us a quick update on that.
Yeah. So my undergraduate is in theater. And so theater with an emphasis in African American and Latino theater. And I really I believed then, I just didn't know how to make it happen. I believe that the arts really does have a place in healing. And how do we use arts as a tool or resource to facilitate healing with individuals and families and communities? And so I think that the stage and even the screen can be what I like to call edutaining, right? It can be educational and entertaining at the same time. And so I am directing a production of The Wiz for Oakdale Academy. Shout out to Oakdale Academy on the south side of Chicago, and the 5th through the 8th graders. And we're using The Wiz and walking through the production from a social emotional standpoint of like looking at each character and identifying what were they looking for and what was the gift. So for example, the Lion, the Tin Man, and the Scarecrow were looking for courage, a heart, and a brain. And we find out by the end of the show that what they were looking for, they already had, right? And then being able to walk with these kids and say, what are some of the gifts that you may already possess that maybe you're just missing because you didn't think you had them, right? But then also putting the play on its feet, and that's been fun, right? To do choreography and blocking and run lines with these kids, and so that's been fun. I've been working on a short film that we're working on producing in the spring called Center Stage, and so it looks at the effects of gun violence on a family of spoken word artists and how they deal with the loss and the grief of their loved one. And the idea is be able to create pieces or experiences where people can share, and then they can lead into conversations that we could have earlier, right? That there is this catharsis that we can experience through the arts. And so whether it's you creating a collage or watching something on TV, how do we experience catharsis through creation is really one of the things that I've always really been interested in. And so I feel like the Lord has allowed me to do more of that. Had the opportunity to go to Columbia last year and do some creative work there. And so, yeah, God's opening some doors to allow me to kind of bring those pieces that are life-giving for me as an artist into the ministry space. And that's been a lot of fun.
Am I remembering that or not, that you have like maybe a children's book in the works or some art around that?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I have 2 children's books out. One's called How Big Is God? And the other one is A Prayer for You. and we created the artwork. They're available on Amazon right now, but they're about to be re-released in a bigger book of collection of poetry and short stories. And the idea around those books were just kind of create non-screen time for families. So each story has a set of questions that families can engage in after it's over with. How can we be praying for your family? Who in the family needs prayer? What is prayer? I miss those conversations that we used to have. You know, a lot of families don't get to like meet around the dinner table anymore. But, you know, one question a day before the kids go to bed or before they leave out for school, where parents can engage with their families and vice versa.
Nice.
It was kind of the idea behind the books that we're creating. So, yeah, so it's called A Prayer for You. And it's available on Amazon. So if y'all want to check them out, we'd appreciate the support.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes for this. Any last question? Any resistance that you felt internally in you or even externally for pursuing those creative outlets when you're a pastor? And you know, pastors are supposed to do pastor things, you know, within this kind of box. Did you feel some of that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I was flat out told, why are you doing it that way? Right. A sermon is supposed to look like this. And again, my clapback would always be Jesus preaching parables. Parables are literally stories that Jesus told to illustrate the kingdom and kingdom characteristics. And so, I think again, we put this burden. Sometimes it comes externally, sometimes it comes internally on like what things are supposed to look like based off what we've always seen, right? Or what we've been told is the right way to do things. But what if God is giving us an opportunity to share the gospel, to share the kingdom in different ways that can only come out through you? That could only come out through dance or poetry or, you know, a mural, whatever the case may be. And so did I experience resistance? Absolutely. I was definitely told I'm a black male from the South. So preaching looked like one thing. It looked like a suit behind a pulpit in a church building. And it had a certain rhythm, certain cadence, all the things, right? And so when I come in wearing, you know, t-shirts and jeans and I've got, you know, I'm reading from different translations. I preached a Christmas service not too long ago, and I used the indigenous translation of the Bible, and people were like, "Is that the Bible?" Yes, yes, it's the Bible, right? But I love reading the indigenous translation of the scriptures because it's so poetic. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. And so, yes, there's a lot of resistance, and you have to think about when you're receiving this commentary, where is it coming from? And from whom is, you know, why is it coming from these people at this time? Sometimes it's because they feel uncomfortable, not because you're necessarily doing something quote unquote wrong, right? So, yes, received a lot of it. But I think now as I'm starting to get older, I'm like, hey, I can only be who God's created me to be.
Yeah.
And that's that.
Exactly. Yeah. And I hope I don't want to go on too long of a tangent here. Just for me, I've experienced it internally a lot within me as I create space to do my fiction writing. So writing nonfiction, you know, Beyond the Battle, Needed Navigation, of a devotional on the Psalms coming out this year called Shelter No Storm. I enjoy all those things, but it's still work. Like it's work to write that type of writing.
Absolutely.
It's a calling. And in some ways it fits the paradigm of what a pastor should do.
What's expected of a pastor.
Allowed to do, allowed to do, right? And then I discovered fiction as a hobby 4 years ago. I never thought I could write fiction. And it was my two brothers. I have two older brothers, and they have hobbies of creating things. And they just challenged me, you know, and I wonder how many, we're just going to wrap up. I don't want to keep you here another hour, but I'm just hypothetically asking, like, I wonder how many pastors you talk to that don't have any hobbies, right? Because, and creative person, because for me as a pastor, I was like, I work out like that. That's good. I like that, but it's not a hobby. I'm not like creating something and this is just me time. And what happened for me internally is this is another big part of my journey, is like I couldn't love myself. I didn't feel like I was worthy of love. Like I could love others. Like, you're worthy of Jesus' love. You should rest. You should, you should have peace in your life. But when it came to me as a pastor, it's like, oh, that's not for me though, because I'm called to follow Jesus, and like just like this sort of double standard I'd put on myself. There's a lot there, but this creative pursuit of writing fiction has been a part of that journey for me, where my brothers challenged me to have a hobby. I don't know what to do. I'm not a good artist, like draw. I can't draw, paint. That's not really interesting to me. So I just sat down on one of my Sabbaths, Monday, and I have a very, very visionary mind. Like, just boom, the pictures are there. And I just had this picture of a story of how a movie, like how it would start. And I just started typing it. And Mac, this became like the greatest gift from God, I think maybe that I've ever experienced, because it gave my brain it's my right brain total like recess, just run around on the playground.
It does.
And have fun. And in doing so, I'm writing really meaningful things, and I'm incorporating humor and action. And the guilt came in from, I can't spend my time on this or pursue this because this isn't something that, within that box of being a pastor should be. So that internal resistance, though, if anyone's feeling that, I think that's been a real outlet towards my spiritual formation and learning, oh man, like I do, I can love myself in the sense that, like, if I believe Jesus loves me and I say that and I build my life on that, then I need to treat myself like someone Jesus loves, like the way Jesus, when you love someone, you treat them a certain way. So
absolutely,
it was almost like I was negating the love of Jesus for me. I'd say I believed it, but I didn't believe it because that couldn't be for me, right? There's a lot there, but man, it's been a really life-giving process.
We're good at writing the prescription, but horrible at taking the medicine.
Yes.
And one of the things I tell somebody, I just told a brother last night, he was like, hey, so one of my scripts just got nominated for an award. And so he was like, hey, I would love to read your script. And I was like, hey, I would love to. And I don't know, immediately, talk about resistance, right? I was like, ooh. And I said, hey, I just want you to know, I'll be more than glad to share the script with you. It's not an episode of The Chosen. Like it is it's really good, honest, clean. But it's not. There's some people that get into fights, and there's some conversation like this. But it's, and I felt like I needed to defend the work, and I was like, wait a minute, why am I defending the work? I was like, yeah, if you would like to read it, I would love for you to read it because I love your feedback. And so I think that we need to remember that all good and perfect gifts come from the Lord above, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be. Again, it goes back to the avatar of the pastor. The pastor only writes Christian nonfiction that is theologically sound in King James, right? Like that is so not it, right? There are some. I'm working with a brother right now. I'm a part of a writer's cohort, and he's writing some really amazing fiction stuff. And we've been sharing pages back and forth. Could it be that God can meet us in the pages of this fiction?
Yeah.
And I will also say this, I started writing poetry probably 2 years ago, and I would have never called myself a poet, but I'm absolutely loving the abstract movement of poetry, and I'm always surprised at what comes out by the end of a piece. And so I had written several pieces. That's where 2 of the children's books got inspired, and I didn't realize how much grief I hadn't processed.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Sometimes we just need to create for the sake of creating. And I want to go back to what you said earlier about pastors and hobbies. If you ask a pastor what their hobby is, I promise you that you will probably get more pauses. I've been in rooms plenty of times, and they can tell me about their church, they can tell me about their family, they can tell them about their education, and they'll be like, "Oh, tell me some of your hobbies." And you'll be surprised, there are very few pastors that have a hobby. So getting something and being intentional about something where they can create, or what you just did, and be able to say, hey, I'm gonna try this. Like, what would it hurt to try?
Right.
If it's crap, it's crap, but it's still yours, right? And you created, and you created space just to be with yourself and figure out what comes out. The process of creation is not necessarily the finished product. The process of creation is to get what's inside out.
Yes. And just to be clear, and then I'll get you out of here. I on that hobby day that I started writing, I was not planning to publish this. This was for me. This was like I'm drawing a picture of a painting. I'm not going to go try to sell this. And I got about 50 pages in, over the course of weeks or months. And I went, whoa, like I just wrote 50 pages. I might as well just write a whole story. And then I did. And I went, I love this. Like the whole thing. I love the process. I love my story. And now it was like, I'm going to try to get this published. Right. And that was a really, so I would encourage, and my brothers were really adamant on the hobby being, you're creating something. I think they were right. My hobbies were running, working out. Those are good hobbies in a sense, but they're not really. I think there's something about creating something that it does to our brain, that it frees in us, that have been really healthy. So
I'm doing a symposium next week at North Park Seminary, and on this very topic, on catharsis through creation. And I know the number one resistance, I was working on my notes last night, the number one resistance that people, that I hear from people when I introduce creation as a possibility to experience catharsis is, oh, I'm not a creative. And I push back on that and I say this: if God is our Father and we are introduced to God in Genesis 1 with him creating, then that means you got a creative gene in you. You just never explored it. And oftentimes, like most of the things in life, we compare our creativity to somebody else's creativity. Well, I'm not as good as Monet. I'm not as fluent as whoever, da, 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 da. It doesn't have to be all of that, right? Some stuff will get published. Some stuff will just come out, right? And that's just okay. My children's book was written after, A Prayer for You was written after my sons had experienced some pretty racist stuff. And it was a prayer that I was writing to God, and I had to get it out because I was so afraid and angry at the same time. And the next thing I know, it had like a rhyme to it, and it had a thing. And I sent it to my wife, and my wife was like, dang, this is really good. You should put this in a children's book, right?
Love it.
So maybe it goes somewhere, maybe it don't, but at least let it come out and see what God does with it.
And enjoy it. Just enjoy it. Like you tell your kids to go draw when they're bored. Like just that's what it should be.
Yeah.
And then if you decide to publish it. You like indie publish it, self-publish it. You don't need the approval. Like just get it out there. So your friends can read it or see. I mean, yeah, it's beautiful, man. I love it. Yeah. Let me get you out of here with this. Where I don't know if you have like a central spot of your creative pursuits.
So you can go.
People can find you there.
Yeah, you can visit me at The Griot Project, The Griot, Griot, project.com. The Griot Project is the name of our nonprofit where we do all the storytelling and healing initiatives that I mentioned earlier. And then if you are a pastor, ministry leader, or a spouse, and we can walk along with you and support you, I would invite you to visit our website at rootedpastors.org, rootedpastors.org. And you'll see me on both those websites. So visit us at the Griot Project, or we'll see you at Rooted. Either way it go, I'd love to meet you.
We'll put both of those in the show notes, but just to repeat it, Griot.
Yes, Griot is a Swahili word for storyteller.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Got it. Mack Sauce, thank you for joining us on the flip side, man. It's been great.
I love you, brother. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Heard the sound of freedom.
All right. Welcome back. I hope that conversation was inspiring to you, challenging. Hope it encourages you to encourage your pastor. If you're a pastor, hope it encourages you that you're not alone. I think often when we feel the types of things Mack and I were talking about, it can feel like we're the one that's really messed up and broken and unqualified and shouldn't be, a pastor. And you look around a room at your denomination or your city or whatever it may be at a conference and think all of them have it all together. I'm the one that's messed up. I firmly believe that all of us are messed up. Some people's masks are just really thick. And in those private closed-door conversations that I've had many of with many pastors, many church planters, there is a lot of insecurity. There's a lot of weakness in all of us. And so, reach out for help. Reach out to Rooted. Have someone walking alongside of you is amazing because you're not alone. And our spiritual formation as pastors is no different than the spiritual formation of any Christ follower. We have to admit our weakness. We have to be vulnerable, and we need Jesus. We need to be reminded of the truths of Jesus as our identity, as that core foundation. And I don't know about you, but I can't do that on my own. I have my own coping mechanisms in my brain's neural pathways of where it goes when it doesn't feel safe, and getting to relearn that with a spiritual director, with a counselor, is been super, super life-giving, and it's what's kept me in the game, so to speak. So with that, we'll have all the links for Mack in the show notes to reach out to him. There will be a link in there as well to his Substack, which you can check out, and to schedule a meeting with him if you'd like spiritual direction. There's a link right there. You can just get right on his schedule and check that out. Feel free to reach out to Rooted Pastors if you have any questions. Last, I was going to say this at the end of the interview. We're running out of time, but talking about being creative as a pastor, and like you shouldn't do things that you're not supposed to do, that, as a pastor within kind of that square. Well, Noah's rant is one of those things. I wanted to say that to Mack. So hopefully some of you as my listeners can appreciate that. That truly, I stopped doing it for a long time for different reasons. But there's always been this tension in me with Noah's rant. Like, pastors shouldn't act like this, and that this podcast isn't like some comedy podcast, and I literally don't know how funny those actually are or aren't. I hope they've gotten a little better over time, but I just wanted to throw that out there. When you hear me doing Noah's rant, whether you listen or not, roll your eyes, maybe you're tired of them, I'm going to keep doing them as a spiritual discipline. They are literally a spiritual practice. It's something my counselor has really pushed me on, is just being true to my true self, like that Noah from middle school, or when I was a child, or in high school, college, and before I was a pastor. What are things I did? And I did things that were goofy, funny, creative, outside of the box, and so that's one of them. So think of me in that light next time you listen to Noah's rant, if you're shaking your head. But come on, the mermaid Santa gumdrop man, you gotta admit that one was pretty good. Check that one out if you missed it. All right, thanks so much for going on this journey with me. Hope to see you over at the Patreon community so we can dive deeper into this with the blog posts I write, and love to interact with you there. I will see you next time on The Flip Side.
The Flip Side with Noah Filipiak is a Beyond Ministries production. Copyright Noah Filipiak. www.noahfilipiak.com. Theme music by Kyle Lake at K-Lake Music. Used with permission. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe wherever podcasts are found.
It's time to bring me closer. There's no purgatory, cause you're in or you're out. When you see him in the clouds, then you know it's going down. Raise them, raise them, raise them. They've been sleeping for some ages. Now all God's babies so confused by this hatred. Pulpit preachers shouldn't aim to be A-list. Money probably long, but short is what your days.